The air in the rusty mug was thick with the smell of stale beer and forgotten dreams. It was a Tuesday night, which meant it was practically deserted. A lone bartender, a man named Sal with a perpetually tired expression, wiped down the counter with a slow mechanical rhythm. In the corner on a small makeshift stage sat Jesse Flynn. Jesse was 24, with a head full of messy brown hair that constantly fell into his eyes, and a heart full of melodies no one seemed to want to hear. His guitar, an old acoustic with a warm, worn finish, was his only constant companion. Tonight he was playing to a handful of empty chairs, a flickering neon sign outside, and Sal, who was more interested in his Sudoku puzzle, closed his eyes, his fingers finding the familiar chords of a new song he'd written. It was about hope, about finding light in the darkest places. His voice, a smooth baritone with a hint of gravel when he pushed it, filled the small space surprisingly rich and clear despite the depressing surroundings. He wasn't just singing, he was pouring his soul out, every note a piece of his yearning. Suddenly the door creaked open. A man stepped in, pulling a wide-brimmed hat lower over his face. He wore dark sunglasses, even indoors, and a heavy coat that seemed a bit much for the mild evening. He moved with a quiet grace, taking a seat at a booth in the back. Shrouded in shadow, he ordered a soda, his voice a low rumble. Jesse barely noticed him at first. He was too deep in his music. He finished the song, the last notes hanging in the air like smoke. There was no applause, of course, just the distant hum of the beer cooler. He sighed, adjusting his guitar, then a soft clearing of a throat. From the back booth, the man raised a hand slightly. "That was beautiful, son," he said. His voice was deep, with a gentle southern drawl that seemed to carry an untold story in every syllable. He hadn't expected anyone to even be listening, let alone say anything. He mumbled a thanks. The man in the hat took a sip of his soda. "What was that song about?" "Sounded like a prayer." Jesse hesitated. "It's about trying to keep believing, even when it feels like everything's against you." He gave a wry chuckle. "Kind of describes my life right now, I guess." "Keep believing," the man echoed softly. "That's a powerful thing to sing about." He leaned forward slightly, though his face remained hidden by the shadows, at his hat. "You got a name, son? Jesse Flynn?" "Jesse," the man repeated as if tasting the name. "My name's John. Just John." He didn't offer a handshake, didn't move from his seat. There was an intensity in his gaze, even behind the dark lenses, that made Jesse feel seen. Jesse played another song, one he'd written years ago, a bluesy tune about heartbreak. He thought about John in the back, wondering what kind of person came to a place like the Rusty Mug on a Tuesday night, alone and in disguise. He tried not to let it distract him, but there was a new energy in the room, a silent witness. As he played, he noticed something. John wasn't just listening. He was feeling the music. His foot tapped almost imperceptibly, his head swayed slightly to the rhythm. There was an appreciation, a deep understanding in his posture that Jesse had rarely encountered from an audience, even a large one. It was as if John knew exactly what it felt like to pour your soul out for an unseen crowd. He finished his set an hour later. Sal paid him the usual meager sum, enough for a few meals maybe if he was careful. As Jesse packed his guitar, he glanced back at the booth. John was gone. The soda glass sat on the table, still half full. It was like he had been a ghost, a figment of Jesse's hopeful imagination. Jesse walked out into the cool night air, the city lights a blurry haze around him. He felt the familiar weight of his guitar case, the even heavier weight of his unfulfilled dreams. He wondered about John. Was he just a random stranger? Or was there something more to that quiet, intense listener? He shrugged it off. Probably just a night owl passing through. Still, the man's words, "keep believing," echoed in his mind. For the first time in a long time, the words didn't feel like a hollow platitude. They felt like a whispered promise. He walked on the lonely street, stretching out before him, a faint melody playing in his head, a melody of hope touched by a mysterious encounter. He didn't know it yet. But the man in the hat was no ordinary stranger, and his life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine. Elvis Presley, or John as he'd introduced himself, sat in the back of his limousine, the city lights streaking past like blurred watercolors. He had asked his driver Jimmy to take a roundabout way back to the hotel. His mind was still back in the rusty mug, wrapped around the voice of Jesse Flynn. He hadn't been looking for anything that night. Just a quiet place to escape the demands, the noise, the constant adoration that at times felt like a cage. He'd slipped out wearing his disguise, just wanting to feel like a regular person for a few hours, and then he'd heard Jesse. The kid wasn't just good, he was exceptional. Raw talent, pure emotion. A voice that could crack open your heart and heal it all at once. Elvis had recognized it instantly, the kind of honest, unpolished genius that rarely made it through the polished commercialized music industry. Jesse reminded him of himself in a way back when he was just a kid from Tupelo with a dream and a guitar. "Did you find what you were looking for, boss?" Jimmy asked from the driver's seat, glancing in the rearview mirror. "He's got the fire, Jimmy, the kind you can't teach." Elvis paused, a plan already beginning to form in his mind. He'd seen so much talent go to waste, swallowed by indifference or bad breaks. He couldn't let that happen to Jesse, not this kid. But he couldn't just walk up to Jesse, reveal himself, and offer a record deal that wouldn't feel right. It would be overwhelming. A charity case, maybe even ruin the very essence of Jesse's passion. He wanted Jesse to earn it, to feel the pride of his own success, but with a little gentle push, a secret hand. "Jimmy," Elvis said, his voice low and serious, "I want you to do some digging on Jesse Flynn. Find out everything you can. Where he lives. If he has family, where else he plays. Be discreet. Nobody, and I mean nobody, is to know I'm involved." Jimmy nodded, understanding the gravity in Elvis's tone. "Consider it done, boss. What's the plan?" "Plan," Elvis mused, staring out at the city lights, "is to give that young man a chance he deserves, without him ever knowing who gave it to him." Over the next few days, Elvis was a man on a mission, albeit a very private one. Jimmy brought him a file on Jesse. Lived in a small rented room above a laundromat. Worked odd jobs to make ends meet. Played a few small rundown bars. His family was back in a tiny town in Mississippi, struggling themselves. Jesse was all alone in the big city, chasing a dream that seemed to be slipping away. This only strengthened Elvis's resolve. He started making calls carefully through intermediaries. He spoke to his most trusted contacts in the music business, people who owed him favors, people who respected his judgment, but most importantly, people who could keep a secret. Painted a picture of a new talent he'd heard about, someone off the radar who deserved a listen. He emphasized the raw, authentic quality, the kind of music that could break through the polished pop of the day. "Don't tell them it's me, of course," Elvis told his longtime manager, Colonel Tom Parker, over the phone, trying to make it sound like a casual observation. "Just a tip for a promising young artist. Maybe a small-time producer. Someone who's looking for something fresh." The Colonel, ever the shrewd businessman, was initially skeptical. "Another one of your projects, Elvis. We have enough on our plate." "This one's different, Colonel. This one's special. Just a little nudge. Nothing that will tie back to me directly." Elvis knew how to play the Colonel appeal to his love for a good gamble, a hidden gem. Reluctantly, the Colonel agreed to make a few discreet inquiries. Elvis didn't want the Colonel's full involvement, just enough to open a door. He wanted to pull the strings himself from the shadows. He thought about Jesse sitting on that small stage, pouring his heart out to empty chairs. He remembered the quiet dignity in Jesse's thanks and the genuine hope in his song lyrics. That kind of talent, that kind of spirit, deserved more. It deserved a voice that could reach millions. Elvis felt a familiar surge of purpose. He had been given so much. Now he had a chance to pay it forward, to nurture a fragile spark into a roaring flame. He would be Jesse's guardian angel, his silent benefactor. This secret would be his greatest gift, a quiet promise to himself and to the music that still stirred his soul. He looked out at the city, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Jesse Flynn had no idea what was coming, and that, Elvis decided, was exactly how it should be. Jesse Flynn woke up to the usual sound of spin cycles from the laundromat below his room. He stretched, feeling the familiar aches from sleeping on a thin mattress. Another day, another round of job searching, another night playing to the same few faces. The memory of John from the rusty mug was fading, becoming just another strange detail in the tapestry of his struggling life. He was pouring himself a cup of weak coffee when a knock sounded on his door. He rarely had visitors. It was a man in a sharp suit holding a crisp business card. "Mr. Jesse Flynn?" the man asked, his voice smooth and professional. "My name is Richard Vance. I'm a talent scout for Capitol Records." Jesse almost dropped his mug. Capitol Records, that was a major label. "Excuse me," he stammered. Vance smiled. "A practiced, polite—" "Yes, Mr. Flynn. We received an anonymous tip about your music. Very compelling. Someone mentioned your performance at the Rusty Mug. Said you had a unique sound." Jesse's mind raced. "We'd like to invite you for an audition," Vance continued, oblivious to Jesse's internal turmoil. "Next Tuesday, 10 a.m. at our studios downtown. Just you and your guitar. Can you make it?" Jesse could barely speak. Yes, of course." After Vance left, Jesse stood in the middle of his tiny room, heart pounding. Capitol Records, it felt like a dream. He called his mother, who wept with joy, and urged him to pack his bags for home if it didn't work out. But Jesse was determined. This was it. This was the chance he'd been waiting for. Meanwhile, a few miles away, Elvis was getting updates from Jimmy. Vance delivered the invitation. Boss Kid was floored. Said he almost dropped his coffee. Elvis chuckled. Pleased. He's also a fan of raw talent, Elvis countered. He just needs to be reminded of what it sounds like. He then gave Jimmy specific instructions. Also, arrange for a new set of strings to be delivered to Jesse's address tomorrow, and maybe a new tuner. Anonymous. Of course, we want him to sound his best. The next day, Jesse found a small, unmarked package outside his door. Inside were brand new guitar strings and a professional tuner. He stared at them, bewildered. It was exactly what he needed. His old strings were frayed, and his tuner was unreliable. Who could have sent them? He thought again of John, the mysterious man from the bar. Could he be doing all this? It seemed too grand, too coordinated for a single stranger. He spent the next few days practicing relentlessly his old guitar, singing with the new strings. He polished his best songs, pouring all his hopes and fears into every note. He was a bundle of nerves and excitement. The day of the audition arrived. Jesse, dressed in his cleanest jeans and a simple shirt, walked into the sleek, modern lobby of Capitol Records. He felt like an alien in a spaceship. Richard Vance met him smiling. They led him to a small, soundproofed studio. There was a single microphone, a chair, and Vance. Just as Jesse was about to start, the door opened and a portly man with a serious expression walked in. "Richard, I'm just here to grab some files." The man said gruffly, "Don't mind me. Just pretend I'm not here." It was Mr. Henderson, the head of artists and repertoire. Jesse's heart hammered deal now. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began to play. He started with the song he'd played that night in the Rusty Mug, the one about keeping belief. He didn't just sing it, he lived it. His voice soared, filled with the raw emotion of years of struggle and unwavering hope. He played another, a soulful blues number, then a more upbeat, catchy tune that showed his range. He finished the last chord, fading into the silence of the studio. Vance was smiling broadly. Henderson, who had been leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, slowly pushed himself upright. He walked over to Jesse, his expression unreadable. "Kid," Henderson said, his voice surprisingly soft, "you got something. Something real." He looked at Vance. "Richard, this isn't just an audition. This is a discovery." Jesse felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled his knees. He had done it. He had actually done it. He still had no idea how any of this had happened. Who the anonymous tipster was, or who sent the strings. But he knew deep down that someone had helped him. Someone believed in him enough to open a door he could never have opened alone. The unseen hand had guided him, and for the first time in a long time, Jesse felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The days following the audition were a blur for Jesse. He walked around in a daze, half expecting to wake up from a dream. Richard Vance called him the very next day. "Mr. Flynn," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "Mr. Henderson was very impressed, extremely impressed. We want to offer you a development deal. A development deal. It wasn't a full record contract, not yet. It meant Capitol Records would invest in him, give him studio time to record demos, maybe even help him with a few live gigs to get his name out there. It was a foot in the door, a chance to prove himself, to turn the whisper of a deal into a roar. Jesse immediately accepted. He spent hours on the phone with his mother trying to explain it, all her excited gasps and joyful tears making his own eyes sting. He was actually going to record music in a professional studio. His music. Across town, Elvis received the news with a quiet sense of satisfaction. "Development deal, huh?" he murmured to Jimmy. "Good, it's enough to get him started, but still keeps him hungry." "Henderson really liked him, boss," Jimmy reported. "Said he hasn't heard a voice like that in years." Elvis nodded, a faint smile on his lips. "I knew it now. The next phase, he's going to need good material, and he's going to need to learn the ropes of a studio. This can be intimidating for a new artist." He began making new, discreet arrangements. Without Jesse knowing, Elvis arranged for some of his own trusted session musicians, top-tier players who understood how to make a song shine, to be randomly available for Jesse's demo sessions. He also subtly recommended a seasoned, kind-hearted recording engineer, a man named George, who had a reputation for mating young artists. George, Elvis had said to him on a pre-arranged secure phone line, "I've heard about a young man named Jesse Flynn. He's got raw talent. I want you to make sure he's comfortable in that studio. Guide him. Make him sound like $1,000,000. He didn't say why he was so interested, but George, who respected Elvis immensely, understood the unspoken request for excellence and care. Jesse's first day in the studio was overwhelming. The equipment was state-of-the-art, the soundboards intimidatingly complex. George, the engineer, greeted him with a warm smile. "Welcome. Jesse heard good things about you. Don't worry. We'll make some magic here." The session musicians arrived, a drummer with an easy smile, a bassist with a calm demeanor, and a guitarist who could make his instruments sing. Jesse was nervous. These were professionals far beyond the amateur musicians he'd occasionally played with, but they were incredibly kind and patient. They listened carefully to his songs, offering suggestions that elevated the melodies without changing their essence. The guitarist, a man named Leo, seemed to have an almost telepathic understanding of Jesse's style. "You got a natural feel, kid," Leo said after they nailed a difficult solo. "Just let it flow." Jesse spent weeks in the studio pouring his heart into his recordings. He felt like he was living a dream, but there was still that persistent mystery. Who was the anonymous tipster who kept providing these strange, perfect assists? The new strings, the professional tuner, and now these incredible musicians and the patient engineer who seemed to anticipate his needs. He asked George one day during a coffee break. George paused, stirring his coffee. "Not exactly, Jesse, just that it came from a very reliable source. Someone with an ear for genuine talent." He gave Jesse a knowing look, but didn't elaborate. Jesse felt a flicker of frustration mixed with immense gratitude. He wished he could thank the person directly. He imagined a mysterious figure, a guardian angel watching over him from the shadows. He sometimes thought back to John and the rusty mug, his quiet presence, his deep, resonant voice. It seemed too big of a coincidence, But how could a man sitting alone in a dive bar orchestrate all this? One evening after a particularly productive session, Jesse found a note tucked into his guitar case. It was handwritten on plain paper with no signature. Don't just chase the music, Jesse. Let the music chase you. And never forget the quiet fire that started it all. Jesse stared at the note, his mind buzzing. The quiet fire. He remembered playing to the empty chairs, the dim lights, and that one figure in the back booth. He remembered the feeling of pouring his soul out, unfiltered and raw. The words felt like a direct message from John. He clutched the note, a shiver running down his spine. The unseen hand was closer than he thought, guiding him, encouraging him. He didn't know who this mysterious benefactor was, but he felt an overwhelming sense of connection, of being truly understood. He knew one thing for sure: he wouldn't let them down. He would work harder, sing truer, and make sure that the quiet fire he felt inside would burn bright for the whole world to hear. The dental recordings were finished. Jesse listened to them in his tiny room, a mix of awe and disbelief swirling inside him. His voice, accompanied by those incredible session musicians, sounded better than he'd ever imagined. The songs had a polish, a professional sheen, yet they still retained the raw emotion he'd poured into them. Richard Vance called him to a meeting at Capitol. Jesse Vance said, his face beaming, "These demos are phenomenal, absolutely stellar. We're going to put them in front of some key people in the industry. See if we can get some buzz going. We're talking radio stations, music critics, even some film and TV contacts for potential placements." Jesse tried to remain calm, but inside his heart was doing a wild jig. This was it. This was the moment his music could finally reach beyond the walls of the rusty mug. Elvis, meanwhile, was orchestrating the next phase of his secret mission. He had already pulled strings, through Jimmy of course, to ensure the demo tapes landed on the desks of specific radio programmers and music journalists known for their independent taste. He had even managed to get one of Jesse's songs quietly inserted into the rotation of a small, influential college radio station, just to test the waters. "Make sure it doesn't look too obvious," Jimmy Elvis had stressed. "No big fanfare, just a 'hey, listen to this new guy' kind of thing." He also arranged for a small, anonymous deposit to be made into Jesse's bank account. Not a huge sum, just enough to cover rent for a few months, buy some decent clothes and maybe a better guitar. "He needs to focus on the music, not on where his next meal is coming from," Elvis told Jimmy. "And a musician needs a good instrument." A few days later, Jesse checked his bank account online, a habit born of necessity and anxiety. His eyes widened. A substantial amount of money, far more than he'd expected, had appeared. The deposit description simply read, "Gift." He stared at it, bewildered. It wasn't a mistake. He checked his weight off his shoulders. Could finally stop taking odd jobs and focus entirely on his music. It had to be the mysterious benefactor. Who else could it be? He felt a profound sense of gratitude mixed with a growing curiosity about this person who kept silently changing his life. The first ripple of success came subtly. One afternoon, Jesse was walking past a small cafe, and he stopped dead in his tracks. From inside, he heard his song, the one about keeping belief. It was playing on the cafe's radio. He pressed his face against the glass, listening intently, a thrill coursing through him. It was real. His music was out there. Then came the calls. Small clubs, slightly bigger than the Rusty Mug, started offering him opening slots for more established local acts. Music bloggers began writing about the intriguing new voice from Capitol Records. One critic, known for her sharp tongue, wrote a surprisingly warm review of his demo, praising his raw authenticity in a sea of manufactured pop. Jesse was overwhelmed. He was playing more, rehearsing more, and even doing his first few interviews. He was still living simply, but his world was expanding at an astonishing rate. He was sitting in a coffee shop one afternoon reading a glowing review of his demo in a local music magazine when a figure walked past his table. It was a man tall and with a familiar, confident stride. He was wearing dark glasses and a fedora pulled low. Jesse felt a jolt of recognition. The way the man held himself, the subtle swagger, the slight tilt of his head, it was eerily similar to John from the Rusty Mug. The man paused almost imperceptibly near Jesse's hand. Jesse looked up, his eyes trying to meet the man's behind the dark lenses. For a split second he felt an intense connection, a sense of knowing. Then the man moved on, walking out the door and disappearing into the bustling street. Jesse stared after him, his heart pounding. Was it him? Could it be? The mysterious benefactor, the man from the bar, the one who set all this in motion. The thought was staggering, almost unbelievable. How could someone so powerful, someone who could orchestrate such a chain of events, be that quiet, disguised figure in a dive bar? He felt a deep hum of anticipation, a feeling that something even bigger was on the horizon. His career was gaining momentum, and he was finally seeing the first real signs of success. But the mystery of his hidden helper remained a constant, intriguing presence in his new exciting life. He had a feeling that one day he would meet that person again, and when he did, he would have a lot to say. Jesse's world was no longer confined to the laundromat above his room. He was spending more time in recording studios, on small stages, and in radio station green rooms. His songs, once just whispers in his own mind, were now being heard. College radio station, the blogs, the small club gigs, it all built a steady hum of recognition. His development deal with Capitol Records was upgraded to a full artist contract. It was still modest, but it was real. He had a manager now, a young, enthusiastic woman named Sarah, assigned to him by Capitol. She believed in him completely. "The label's really excited about your first single, Jesse," Sarah told him one day over lunch. "It's the one about finding light in the dark. We're planning to release it next month. We think it's a perfect introduction to who you are." Jesse's excitement was a constant buzzing current beneath his skin. He was recording his debut album, pouring every ounce of his being into each track. The anonymous help continued in subtle ways. A high-end microphone appeared at the studio for his vocal sessions, supposedly a new acquisition by Capitol, but Jesse had a feeling it was another gift from his unseen hand. Later, a brand new top-of-the-line acoustic guitar was delivered to his apartment, addressed simply to Jesse Flynn, musician. No sender. Jesse ran his hands over the smooth wood, the perfect weight of it. It was too expensive to be a gift from the label. He knew who it was from Elvis. From his vantage point, watched with immense pride. Jimmy brought him news clippings, radio reports, and even recordings of Jesse's live performances. "He's getting a following, boss," Jimmy said, handing Elvis a newspaper with a small article about Jesse. "People are talking." "Good," Elvis said, a deep satisfaction in his voice. "He deserves it. His music is pure. He hasn't forgotten where he came from." Elvis was careful not to interfere too much. Now, Jesse was on his own path, making his own way. But he kept a watchful eye, making sure the right doors opened, the right opportunities presented themselves. He made a few more discreet calls, suggesting to influential DJs and music reviewers that they keep an ear out for Jesse's upcoming single. He emphasized the honesty and depth of Jesse's lyrics. Knowing that those qualities would resonate, the single, Whispers of Dawn, was released. Jesse was a nervous wreck on release day. He spent it pacing his apartment, checking his phone every 5 minutes. Then the first call came. It was Sarah, practically screaming, "Jesse, it's happening. Whispers of Dawn just got added to the rotation on Z100. That's a major station, Jesse. This is huge." He turned on the radio, his hands shaking. And there it was, his song, on a major commercial radio station, his voice singing about hope, reaching hundreds of thousands of people. He closed his eyes, tears stinging them. This was what he had dreamed of, prayed for. Whispers of Dawn started climbing the charts, slowly at first, then with increasing speed. Jesse started getting requests for interviews from national music magazines. He was invited to perform on a small, late-night TV show. He was still relatively unknown, but the momentum was building. He performed Whispers of Dawn on the TV show. He was terrified, but he channeled all his fear and excitement into his music. He sang with his eyes closed, pouring his heart out just as he had done in the Rusty Mug. The audience was silent, captivated. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Back in his hotel room, watching the broadcast, Elvis felt a surge of emotion. He saw the same raw talent he had witnessed that night in the bar, but now it was polished, confident, ready for the world. He saw a young man who had stayed true to himself. "He did good, didn't he, boss?" Jimmy said, standing beside him. Elvis just nodded. A lump in his throat. He had given Jesse a push, opened a few doors, but Jesse had walked through them with his own talent and determination. The thought filled him with a quiet, profound joy. He knew the world was about to discover Jesse Flynn, and he had helped make it happen without a single soul knowing. It was his best-kept secret, and his proudest achievement. Jesse's life transformed almost overnight. Whispers of Dawn became a breakout hit, climbing steadily into the top 20. His debut album, Quiet Fire, was released to critical acclaim. He was no longer just Jesse Flynn, the struggling musician. He was Jesse Flynn, the rising star. His schedule was packed. Interviews, photo shoots, concert dates. He was playing bigger venues. Now his name in lights. He had moved out of his small room above the laundromat and into a modest apartment that felt like a palace. He even had a small touring band, talented musicians who respected his vision. Through all the whirlwind, the mystery of his benefactor remained a constant, quiet presence in his mind. He still received the occasional anonymous gift, a rare vintage microphone delivered to his studio, an uncredited donation to a music charity in his name. It was always thoughtful, always helpful, and always untraceable. He often found himself looking for John in crowds, in restaurants, anywhere he went. He imagined what he would say if he ever found him. How could he possibly thank someone for changing his entire life? One evening, Jesse was performing a sold-out show at a historic theater. The energy was electric. He stood on stage bathed in spotlights, looking out at a sea of cheering faces. He was living his dream. Paused between songs, looking out at the balcony seats, letting the moment sink in. In one of the private boxes set back in the shadows sat a lone figure. He was wearing a hat and dark glasses, even in the dimly lit theater. He was quiet still, watching Jesse with an intense focus that cut through the noise of the crowd. Jesse's eyes met the box. A jolt like electricity went through him, that posture, that aura. Couldn't see the man's face clearly, but a feeling of profound recognition washed over him. It was him. It had to be John, his benefactor. For a long moment their gazes, though one was obscured by darkness, seemed to lie. Jesse felt an overwhelming mix of emotions, gratitude, wonder, a desperate need to know. He wanted to call out, to stop the show, to run to the box. But the man in the box gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. It was a gesture of quiet approval, of shared understanding. And then he slowly, carefully began to rise from his seat. Jesse wanted to follow, but the band started the intro to his next song, a powerful ballad he had to sing. He couldn't let down the thousands of people who had come to hear him. Tore his eyes away from the box, his heart pounding, and launched into the song as he sang. He kept glancing back at the box. The figure was gone, vanished. Just like that night at the Rusty Mug. It was as if he was a phantom, appearing only to confirm his presence, then disappearing again. After the show, Jesse rushed back. "Did anyone see who was in box 3? He asked his manager, Sarah, almost breathless. Sarah frowned. "Box 3? No? Why, just a regular ticket holder, I assume." "No," Jesse insisted. "He was wearing a hat and sunglasses. He looked familiar, like someone I knew a long time ago." Sarah looked at him, concerned. "Jesse, you've been working too hard. Maybe you're just seeing things," she suggested. "He get some rest." But Jesse knew he wasn't seeing things. He knew it was him. The encounter had been fleeting, but the feeling it left behind was profound. It was a confirmation that his silent guardian angel was still watching, still proud. He spent the rest of the night replaying the moment in his mind, the subtle nod, the quiet presence. It wasn't about fame for this person. It was about the music, about seeing a dream come true. And that made Jesse even more determined to use his success for good, to make music that mattered, to honor the extraordinary kindness he had received. He might not know the identity of his benefactor, but he knew the spirit of their kindness, and that connection, unseen and unspoken, was more powerful than any public acknowledgement could ever be. He knew that their paths would cross again, perhaps, when the time was truly right. Jesse Flynn's debut album, Quiet Fire, was a phenomenon. It wasn't just a hit. It was a cultural moment. Critics raved about his authenticity, his soulful voice, and his songwriting. Whispers of Dawn became the anthem of a generation, reminding people to hold on to hope. He was performing on major television shows, selling out arenas, and his face was on the cover of magazines. He was a bona fide star. He still felt like the same kid from the Rusty Mug, just with a much bigger stage. Elvis watched it all from a distance, a deep sense of contentment settling over him. He rarely left his home, now finding solace in his quiet life, surrounded by his loved ones. But he followed Jesse's career closely. He bought every album, watched every TV performance, and read every article. "He's doing it," Boz Jimmy would say, showing him the latest sales figures or concert reviews. "He's really doing it." "I knew he would," Elvis would reply, a quiet smile on his face. He never sought credit, never breathed a word of his involvement to anyone beyond Jimmy. It was his secret, a personal triumph. He had given a hand up, and Jesse had soared the biggest moment. For Jesse was yet to come. He was nominated for several major music awards, including Best New Artist and Album of the Year. The awards ceremony was a huge event broadcast. Live across the country. Jesse walked the red carpet, a mix of nerves and excitement. He thought about his journey from playing for Sal in an empty bar to this. In a quiet corner of his living room, Elvis watched the ceremony on his television. He was dressed in his comfortable robes, a cup of tea in his hand. He wasn't interested in the glitz and glamour. He was only interested in one thing: Jesse. When Jesse's name was announced as the winner for Best New Artist, Elvis felt a surge of pure joy. He clapped softly. A lone round of applause in his quiet room. Jesse walked up to the stage, overwhelmed with emotion. He thanked his family, his band, his manager, the record label. And then he paused, looking out at the glittering audience. "There's someone else," Jesse said, his voice thick with emotion, "who I can never truly thank, someone who heard me playing in a tiny empty bar when I felt like giving up, someone who believed in me, and somehow, without ever revealing their identity." Ovitz leaned forward, listening intently. "And every note I sing, every song I write, is a thank you to you." A murmur went through the audience. People wondered who he was talking about. Reporters scribbled furiously. But Elvis just sat there. He understood. He had not forgotten the anonymous kindness, the silent hand that had guided him. It was more than any public acknowledgement. It was a testament to the power of a single selfless act. Elvis felt a deep, profound peace. His work was done. Jesse was exactly where he was meant to be, using his talent to inspire others, just as Elvis had hoped. Cameras focused on Jesse as he accepted his award, his face beaming with humble gratitude. Elvis watched a silent mentor, a proud father figure. He knew that Jesse's career was just beginning and that he would continue to touch countless lives with his music. And in the quiet solitude of his home, Elvis knew that he had played a part in that. It was the greatest gift he could have given and the greatest reward he could have received. The boy from Tupelo, who had once dreamed of changing the world with his music, had helped another dream take flight in the most humble and profound way possible. Years passed. Jesse Flynn became a global superstar. His albums sold millions. His concerts filled stadiums and his songs became classics. He remained humble, never forgetting his roots or the kindness that had launched his career. In every interview, in every acceptance speech, he mentioned his mysterious benefactor, keeping the legend alive. The public speculated wildly about who this person could be. Some thought it was a record executive, others a reclusive knocker. No one ever guessed the truth. Jesse himself continued his quiet search, driven by a deep longing to finally thank the person who had given him everything. He often looked back at that first night in the Rusty Mug. He remembered John, the man in the hat and sunglasses. He replayed their brief conversation, the man's deep, resonant voice, his quiet intensity. He remembered the simple words, "Keep believing," and the note about the quiet fire. One day, while cleaning out an old box of memorabilia, Jesse found a forgotten souvenir from the Rusty Mug. It was a faded bar coaster, and on the back in faint pencil were a few scribbled lines. He had forgotten about it entirely. He picked it up and his heart gave a lurch. The handwriting was flowing, distinct, elegant. And beneath the scribbles, a faint impression from where the pencil had pressed too hard, were two initials, E.P. Jesse stared at it, his breath catching in his throat. E.P. He knew only one E.P. who commanded that kind of power, that kind of respect, who had that kind of influence in the music industry. But it seemed impossible. Elvis. Why would he be in a dive bar, disguised, helping a struggling musician? Why would he keep it a secret? He thought about the subtle southern drawl, the magnetic presence, even behind the disguise. He remembered the specific powerful connections that had opened doors for him, the top-tier musicians who randomly appeared in his studio sessions, the vintage microphone that seemed to arrive out of nowhere. It all started to make sense in a way that was both incredible and overwhelming. He kept the coaster his secret. He never told anyone about the initials. He knew that if it was Elvis, then Elvis wanted it to remain a secret. It was a gift given with no expectation of credit, a pure act of generosity. And Jesse, having been the recipient of such grace, understood the value of that silence. He imagined Elvis watching him from afar, perhaps still wearing a hat and sunglasses, a quiet smile on his face, proud of what Jesse had become. The thought filled him with warmth and a renewed sense of purpose. Years later, Elvis Presley passed away. The world mourned the loss of a legend. Jesse, like millions of others, felt a profound sadness. He performed a tribute concert, singing Elvis's songs with a raw, emotional power that moved audiences to tears. He also included Whispers of Dawn in the set, and before he sang it, he spoke to the crowd. "Tonight we remember a king," Jesse said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "A man who inspired so many of us. I, too, was touched by his spirit, by his unspoken kindness. He taught me, through his example, that music is innate. But in his heart, and in the hearts of those who truly knew him, he was speaking directly to the man who had changed his life." He sang Whispers of Dawn that night with more passion than ever before. Every note, a silent thank you, a private acknowledgement of the man who had been his unseen angel. The legacy of kindness, passed from one musical soul to another, continued to echo through the world. Decades passed. Jesse Flynn, now a beloved elder statesman of music, still toured occasionally, his voice richer, his songs deeper. He had a family, a beautiful home, and a legacy built on integrity and authentic artistry. He never stopped telling the story of his mysterious benefactor, though he never publicly revealed the initials he'd found on that old coaster. The story became part of his legend, inspiring countless young musicians to keep believing. He had made sure to embody the generosity he had received. He quietly funded scholarships for aspiring artists, mentored young talents, and made anonymous donations to music programs in struggling communities. He sought no credit, finding his reward in seeing others flourish just as his own benefactor had. Sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet, Jesse would sit with his old acoustic guitar. Not the one from the Rusty Mug, but the beautiful top-of-the-line one that had mysteriously appeared at his door all those years ago. He would gently strum the chords of Whispers of Dawn, and his mind would drift back to that smoky bar, to the man in the back booth. He remembered the soft, reassuring voice, the deep gaze behind the dark glasses. He thought of the subtle nod at his concert, the quiet disappearances. He felt a profound enduring connection to that man, a bond that transcended fame and time. He believed with every fiber of his being that Elvis, somewhere, somehow, was still listening, still smiling. He also had a special place in his heart for the rusty mug. He had quietly bought the bar years ago, not changing its name or its humble appearance, but ensuring that young, struggling musicians always had a place to play, a stage to share, their quiet fire. He made sure Sal, the old bartender, was taken care of until he retired. He knew what it felt like to be Jesse Flynn in that bar playing to no one, and he wanted to make sure other Jesses had a chance. One quiet evening, Jesse was at home, listening to an old record. It was an Elvis Presley album, one of his gospel recordings. As Elvis's powerful, soulful voice filled the room, Jesse closed his eyes. He imagined the two of them, a young, struggling artist and the king, connected by the universal language of music, by a single act of profound kindness. He remembered the words from the note. "Don't just chase the music, Jesse. Let the music chase you, and never forget the quiet fire that started it all." He had done that. He had let the music chase him, letting his passion guide his life. And he had never, not once, forgotten the quiet fire, the spark of hope in a dark bar, ignited by a man who sought no glory, only the pure joy of seeing a dream come true. His career was a testament to his talent, yes, but also to that unseen hand, that unwavering belief. Jesse had built his legacy on that foundation, a harmony of gratitude, humility, and the powerful ripple effect of human kindness. He knew his story. The full, untold version of it was a gift from Elvis, just as his career had been. And that quiet, enduring harmony was the greatest song of all.